Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our True Women's Health Facebook Live. Today is a beautiful sunny day in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Finally, if everyone who's lived in Michigan knows, it's been gray and dreary for April, May, so we're so excited to see the sunshine. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, right? How do we get women to eat healthy? How do we get them on a better weight journey? And we're going to have a little bit of a different twist today by talking a little bit more about the mindset that goes into healthy eating. Now, just a reminder for everyone, extra weight that we need to lose, having obesity, having severe obesity is a major problem in this country, right? So everywhere from high blood sugars, high blood pressure, and everything that comes with all those metabolic disorders, right? Dementia, cancers, heart disease is a huge issue. And when we look at the rates of obesity over time, sort of on a state by state basis, we can really see that all those rates are going up. We have like a map that we can show, right? And this is just kind of a reminder that this is a real issue. And a lot of women can feel like kind of solo in their journey of like, oh my gosh, my weight's going up. I don't know. It must just be me. But no, this is a real reality for a lot of people across this country. And unfortunately, these numbers are only going up. So this is such an important topic to keep revisiting time and time again, and to look at it with a little bit of a different spin every time, right? And sort of see where the different threads of weight sort of overlay and how we can be helpful for anyone that's at any point of their weight loss journey. So today I have a very special guest. Dr. Shawn Hondorp is a psychologist, and she specializes in healthy eating. Welcome, Shawn.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Now, in addition to sort of doing your own podcast and having your own practice, you have a lot of experience with helping patients lose weight, like at a variety of different levels, right?
Yep, I've been in the field for quite a while now, doing a whole bunch of different clinics and research and clinical work, and so I've kind of been interested in the psychology of eating behavior for many years now.
So how did you sort of get started with that?
Early on, Michigan State undergrad, I got super interested in genetics of eating disorders at that time, and it just evolved and changed over time. I saw a lot of people struggling. I actually share on my podcast, I was struggling. I was in the binge diet cycle myself, and I like now to talk about like the ways that I've watched the field. There's some good going on in the field, but there's some major issues with how we help people change their behavior. And so
Yeah.
I love what I do, and I think more people deserve accurate information about these topics.
Yeah, so interesting. So, I mean, Shawn, I know that you can relate. So, every day I see a lot of women that come to my office. And, in addition to other medical things that are going on with them, one of the most common complaints is sort of how do I lose weight? And a very common history that comes up in our office visits is a lot of different diets have been tried, right? Everything from super restrictive diets to not so restrictive diets, and everywhere in between. And so it can be really hard as a clinician, right, to sort of then give other dietary advice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I see the same thing. That's people that I work with most have been, they don't need nutrition knowledge most of the time. Occasionally they do, but a lot of
Yeah.
times they're like,
Yeah.
I've done all the things. I know the points and the
Yeah.
nutrition grams of everything. Right. And
Yeah.
so what we need to help people understand, and what is often missing is understanding what is the reason you're making these changes. And so a lot of times what I'll refer to, and many people do, I didn't make up the term diet mentality, is this, it's really a restrictive mindset. Some people are doing actual restrictive behaviors, right? They're eating too low of calorie, they're being too limiting in what they're eating, and that's prompting feeling out of control or feeling ineffective. But a lot of times for people, like you said, they might be doing something not all that restrictive, but they're still caught in that cycle, because they are still really ultimately making their body smaller is the ultimate goal. It's very weight focused. It's very often then calorie focused and not actually addressing any root cause. And unfortunately, restriction, even if it's a mindset, your brain doesn't know the difference between true restriction and mental restriction. So telling
Yeah.
yourself all right, you can have this pizza now, but like it's pretty bad, so you got to get back on
Yeah.
track tomorrow. Your brain's like, oh no,
Yeah.
I'm getting starved and I need to
Yeah.
eat all the pizza I can. It's a true biological response, and it's
Yeah.
actually how our brains were designed. But if we leave that mindset unchecked, then yeah, you're going to get stuck in that cycle still.
Yeah. I always make this joke that as a weight loss doctor, I actually care about people's weight the least. Right? I
Mm-hmm.
really care a lot more about, you know, what's their relationship with food? Are they able to
Mm-hmm.
make good choices? Are they able to turn down things in an okay way, but agree to things in an okay way, enjoy vacations, enjoy, special events. And
Mm-hmm.
their weight will be what it will be, because there's a lot of other factors that sort of are at play to getting our body at whatever weight it wants to be at. But a really major sort of theme and topic is sort of our relationship with food and what that means. We're just going to flash real quick to sort of some of our philosophy that we use at True Women's Health and our weight journey is our weight loss pyramid, right? Trying to understand how we sort of help people, and it can sort of help differentiate our plan. And right at the top there, which is the first thing that we talk about, is sort of our mindset, right? Our mindset about food, our mindset about ourselves, right? Even, loving ourselves and loving our bodies for where they're at and where they need to be. And our mindset, what kind of with other people, because as you know, sort of talking about food sort of trickles into our everyday lives and our relationships with others.
Oh yeah, there's so much. I mean, for many people, some people are really aware of it and other people aren't, but there's so much shame tied up in I feel like I failed, I've messed up. Look, I
Yeah.
tried all these things and it hasn't worked for me, so something's wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
And that can kind of operate under the surface and make it so hard to like do the meal plan that you're intending to do.
Yeah. So Shawn, let's say that I was one of your patients that came to see you, and maybe I was saying that I was one of those people that had tried, several different rounds of different diets time and time again, and I was feeling really bad about myself. What's sort of one of the first pieces of advice that you would hand out?
Yeah, so first I would want to know, actually, first and foremost, I would want to know, are you eating enough throughout the day? So I would want to know, like, and I'm not a dietitian, but a lot of times because and I was part of this field, we would say like, here's your calorie goal, right? It's
Yeah.
calories in versus calories out.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what we know now is that level of calories for most bodies is too restrictive and it prompts feeling out of control. So I would look at that first and foremost. But let's say someone's like, no, Shawn, I'm eating 3 meals, I'm having a couple snacks, but I'm still binge eating at night. Then I'd want to look at, quickly we'd move on to like, what is your thinking process about food, right? Are you labeling foods as good or bad? Are you judging yourself? Are you telling yourself mentally, okay, fine, you can have this tonight, but like you gotta be good. You can't keep doing this. This isn't healthy. What is your self-talk around eating? Because again, that mental restriction can very much keep that cycle going. So yeah, so we have up on the screen there our competence I like to talk about because it's something we know is key for long-term motivation to feel effective, right? So if we feel completely ineffective and we don't trust ourselves, it's really hard to like be motivated to keep doing that thing because it creates a lot of anxiety. So if I failed a bunch of times, I'm going to feel
Mm.
super anxious and I'm not going to want to start another like effort to take good care of myself, right?
I'm just going to pause just for a second because I think that it's so interesting. I see this come up a lot of the time. We'll even have women that will come in and be like, I didn't want to see you because I've failed so many times. Right. And like, what more could we possibly do? And it's like, I can't handle another round of it, sort of. And,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
I think this is something to share, that it's a real thought and feeling, and that's usually can be time to seek out professional help, either with a therapist such as yourself or an obesity medicine doctor such as myself, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you feel like that's resonating within you, just to sort of seek out some extra help in this field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it kind of like it hits me in the chest because you can feel that pain, right, of that person and how much
Absolutely.
courage it takes to be able to be like, I'm showing up for this appointment and admitting
Yeah.
that vulnerability of like, I don't want to come, but I'm here. I'm showing up and I'm scared and I don't know what to expect because the reality is that the field of weight management has led people astray many, many times and it's not very effective for many people, right? So it's like it takes a lot of courage to say, I'm going to try something new, I'm going to try something different. and I'm going to look at things differently this time.
Yeah. And I think it's opening ourselves up to looking at some of our own vulnerabilities, right, within our own self. And that can be kind of hard to do, 100%.
It is very hard to do for all of us, regardless of what topic we're talking about. And it's essential.
Yeah. And I think it was really interesting. One of the things that you said, I don't know about you, but I see a lot of women who, maybe they don't fit what we would say like the DSM-5 or the criteria we use to diagnose a psychological disorder for binge eating, right? Which is a very set number of binges per month and criteria. But I know a lot of women can feel, I call it being bingy, right? Like we've had dinner, we're not particularly hungry, but we just kind of can't get out of that pantry, right? We just can't stop opening the fridge. And maybe we're not doing a full-on binge, but we're sort of overeating, or we're having some threads of emotional eating that, aren't our bodies calling for more energy, but kind of create that little cycle.
Yes. Yeah. I think of most things, and definitely eating patterns on a continuum. So yes, you could meet criteria for full binge eating disorder, but a lot of times people don't meet criteria for that, but they're still in a good amount of distress. And so they technically might meet criteria for eating disorder, not otherwise specified, but really that's a catch-all category. And unfortunately in our culture, it's very normalized to have some disordered relationship with food, and many women do. So a lot of people are like, I just got to get it together. Like I just got to get my, my self-control, willpower back on track. Like it's all about, they all just blame themselves. And when really that's a product of the system, a product of diet culture that kind of prizes shrinking your body above all else. And it creates that restrictive mindset that, again, so many people come to me and they say, well, I just want to stop. I want to stop that overeating behavior or binge eating or whatever. I want to feel more in control. Okay, cool. But they're like, but I'm not restricting. I'm not really restricting anything. Look how much I'm eating. And we have to be detectives, but almost always there's either restrictive behavior or a restrictive mindset that we have to uncover.
Interesting. You said something that I thought was really important to pause on for a second, because I hear this a lot, which is if you're doing a behavior that's causing distress, right? So if we're doing something that makes us feel bad later, that's not normal, right? So maybe it isn't a tremendous amount of food that maybe you're eating, but if you are overeating or being overly restrictive and it's really bothering you, right?
Yep.
Then that's a cue, your body and brain's cue that something about this isn't right. And it's time to maybe seek out some other help in this arena.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, a lot of times I'll work with people and they get very fixated on like the amount of food that they're eating and is it a binge or not. And I frankly don't care that much about that. It's more about how are you feeling about it and what is your mindset behind it that is much more important. Actually, no one can actually tell if it's a binge episode or an overeating episode, which means binge episode means there's loss of control and guilt associated. But you can't, most of us on Thanksgiving eat a decent amount of food more than we normally would, right? And some people might be binge eating on Thanksgiving because they're struggling, right? And some people aren't. And you can sometimes know, like if it's more secretive eating or if it's, more quickly, that might be a sign that it's binge, but actually only the person in the body knows. So there's something I say a lot, like only the person in the body and your mind, like truly knows. You can't, and yet we do make a lot of judgments. That's what our brain does, right? It judges and tries to figure things out and put things in categories, but only you can really know. And a lot of what I do is just asking a lot of questions of how were you feeling in that moment, and did it feel restrictive to you? And sometimes there are people are like, I'm confused by that, but over time they start to get pretty clear on how that feels and how to move away from that, which is really empowering.
Yeah, interesting. You use another word that I think is really important to touch on, because I hear this all the time, which is the word willpower, right? And I have so many people that come in, they're like, I just like literally have no willpower. And we sort of go through all the things that they do have willpower for. So it's not as though they're completely devoid of all of it, right? And they because I feel like it comes with such a degree of shame. Like I I'm having some binges, therefore I have no willpower and I'm a bad person. And
Mm-hmm.
so we spend a lot of time just kind of thinking about willpower and what that means. And, honestly, if any of us have willpower in some of these situations because of all the different sort of neurochemistry that's coming together to create whatever it is in that whatever power we have in those situations.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I love to talk about willpower, and I very much think we think about it in the wrong way, which is
Yeah.
like trying to rely on willpower for managing your eating. You have so many eating decisions. That is not a thing that we need to rely on willpower with. That's why we have
Right.
to somehow return some of the self-trust to like some of those internal signals and actually work with our bodies, because it's too much to like each time fighting tooth and nail. It's not a sustainable way to live, to make, I'm going to try to willpower myself into this healthy habit and this healthy habit. We can use willpower for like our taxes and like things that are really not fun. And, occasionally using some willpower to start a new habit that we really don't want to do, but we ultimately do want to do. Sure, maybe. But like long term, it's not, there's really good data that willpower does not work long term. Self-control gets depleted if we use it too much.
Yeah. I think I see that a lot. I think when people try to, strong will themselves into doing one thing or another. And I sort of ask, it's funny because I always ask this question, well, what do you want to do? And patients always look at me kind of goofy, like, well, aren't you the doctor? Aren't you going to tell me what to do? And it's like, I mean, I could tell patients all day, right, what I think they should be eating. But at the same time, everyone has to have some degree of buy-in and understanding and feeling where their body wants them to be, and where they're ready to go.
Right. Well, yeah. And if we talk about long-term motivation, we need to have a feeling of autonomy. So if we're having too much of that control taken away, and it's fine to get guidance from a professional, right? But ultimately the person takes that guidance, and you as a professional can't tell someone the exact way to eat all the time, because there's no exact way to eat for all humans all the time. And that's a lot of eating decisions, right? And it's just not, and so to feel that autonomy and freedom. Autonomy is freedom of choice without excessive pressure. So feeling like you have some options, and you can trust yourself to make the choice that's right for you, which is a lot of times not the way we feel.
Yeah, I feel like a freedom of choice or autonomy in our world of eating is very difficult, not just from our own internal sort of cues and signals that are coming from the things that we see and hear, but just the world around us, right? I just feel as there's just so much pressure to eat a certain way, whether it be healthy or unhealthy or whatever that means, right? Not only from the medical world, but the marketing world, like billboards and commercials and all that stuff. And then our friends and family that all kind of come with different ideas of what we should be eating in that moment, and it gets really complicated very quickly. And I don't know about you, but I really stress patients having so much self-forgiveness, right, about the different things that we eat, and learning and the journey of handling those different pressures that come at us.
Oh yeah. I mean, very well said, right? There's so many different systems that want you to like eat
Do
this
their
food,
thing.
or
Right.
do their program, or like well-intentioned family members that are like, I feel great, why don't you do what I'm doing? And it's like that,
right,
being able to like, forgive yourself for like, inevitably no one's ever gonna, like, there is no perfect eating, right? Like that's not a thing that exists, and yet we sort of, I don't know if we think that it is, but like always being able to say like, and really, there's no good or bad foods. Like there are foods that are less nutrient dense for sure, but like food can be emotional and it can be a good thing. Not, we don't want to be using it to cope only, right? That's not going to serve anyone, and that's not going to make people feel good. But like food is emotional, and so being able to trust yourself to figure out what that looks like for you is it's such a deeply personal process. But yes, there's so many pressures and shoulds that exist in the world, and unfortunately that's probably not going to go away. So we have to learn to be like, okay, that's there, this is my reaction to that. breathe, and what is right for me, and keep asking yourself that question. So that's probably why it's so interesting for people when you ask them, what do you actually want? Because they probably think the expert you has the answer, because in many ways that's what like our diet and weight loss focus culture has been like. I got
Right.
the plan for you. Let
Right.
me, and you have aspects of the plan for them, but like there's going to be a lot of flexibility within that.
Yeah. I mean, we like to provide people some guidance and help. I will say a lot of times when we talk about food choices, what I tell patients is that food choice comes down to three things. One is education, right? What should I and should I not be eating? Just straight up education in terms of like nutritional content and some basic outlines of fuel, right? Two is logistics. Okay, so I know what to eat, but like I'm a busy mom, right? How do I get this into my house? How do I cook it? How do I afford it? How do I make it tasty? And then last, which is what we're kind of talking about now, is ability, right? How do I live in this space where I'm making healthy or just basic food choices every day in a way that I want to make them and not being overly influenced by all these different factors that are coming into my life, which is
Right,
honestly
right.
probably the hardest piece of all those three things is the ability piece and sort of
Mm-hmm.
figuring out what that means for me in this moment.
Right, right. And yeah, trusting yourself that like certain phases of your life, you might eat a little bit differently than other phases, because, and that's okay too. Like there's not a right way to do it. Like if you have a bunch of things going on, you might, I don't know, like just get some more pre-prepared stuff for a while and be okay with that. And that can be the right choice for you.
Right
And
choice in that moment. Absolutely.
people
Yeah.
might be like, but that's processed, or that's not, it's like, what? Or maybe your own internalized thoughts about that. But
Yeah. So Shawn, we talk a lot about some of those internal thoughts that women will have when they're in the kind of maybe dieting cycle or maybe trying to eat one way over another. So, and we have like a little image that sort of pops up that I think is so telling of different things. Oh, one thing we would talk about is sort of the what we talk about in our practice a lot is what we call our ping to eat, right? Trying to differentiate between biochemically being hungry or having a craving. So I don't know if you talk a lot about naming some of these emotions for patients, but we try our best to sort of start the journey of knowing what we want, right, and listening to our bodies by making some short sort of differentiations by what our body's sort of asking us to do. We see a lot of women that, particularly at night, will maybe be going a little bit, being fueled a little bit more off of cravings versus hunger, particularly if they've had dinner and aren't feeling so hungry, and that the time that they
yeah.
spend sort of in the pantry and fridge is more craving driven.
Yeah, one thing I like, going back to what I said earlier, the thing I never want to jump over because it is so crucial for so many people and it can be so hidden is like, is there a restrictive mindset that is causing that craving to be arbitrarily higher than it would have normally been? And so being able to say like, because I think, yes, emotional eating, like eating just to cope with emotions, absolutely is happens, and it can, we want to look at that, but also getting curious of like, but am I telling myself that this ice cream that I truly want is so bad? Like that's going to make you want that food more after dinner. And again, it's because you've told your brain you can't have it. Your brain's like, ooh. It's like if I were to tell
Right.
you, like if I were to say starting tomorrow you can never have your favorite food, you would probably want it a lot tonight, and you probably wouldn't have necessarily before, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that resonates, but like most
Yeah.
of us anyway. And so so yeah, I think first just making sure that you kind of unpacked that, because that can be that missing piece for a lot of people. And again, it can be obvious, but sometimes it's more hidden. um but but yeah, so being able to tune in, and I will say too, this idea of like permission to eat, right? Permission, going back to the concept of autonomy, I think one of the reasons that reminding yourself you have permission to have it is so important, because you're, a lot of times we're told we don't have permission. So you can even say to yourself, and I'll have people like practice this, like, this is allowed. Like as you're noticing yourself going to let's say the freezer to get the ice cream or something, pausing, sitting down, creating, maybe setting like a little timer or something and saying, I'm just gonna sit with this, but like that is 100% allowed. Like you can have that. And then you explore, and maybe they really do want it, and that's okay. Like you can't have it just be, okay, but eventually I have to convince myself not to get it. Your brain is too smart for that. And
Yeah.
so
Right.
you have to learn to work with yourself. And so that permission piece can be really important. But then, yeah, like, asking yourself perhaps, how am I going to feel over time? That's a nice question to ask too. No, non-judgment, right? Like, oh, if I eat a huge portion, I'll feel quite bad. But if I eat a smaller portion, maybe I'll feel quite good. And that could change, person to person, night to night, right? If you're
Yeah.
super stressed, sometimes when we super stressed, we eat, we feel worse.
Yeah.
Everyone's gut's a little different, right? And they're going to
Yeah.
respond different. But the more you can tune into that, can be really empowering.
Yeah. And even just tuning into the rest of your body, like we definitely see when patients aren't sleeping, right? For instance,
Yeah.
that can really crank up cravings a lot and hunger a lot.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's sort of just being okay and acknowledging, right? Like I pulled an all-nighter because I had to do an extra shift at work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give my body permission to have a little extra food today, right? Maybe,
Yeah.
and I'm going to sit here and really focus and pay attention to what I'm eating, but I'm not going to be hard on myself and sort of blame myself for sort of being hard on my body for being where it is today, right?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And tuning into that hunger fullness is something that is a skill that a lot of people will be like, but I'm always hungry or I'm never hungry. I hear that a lot. Kind of, and some people are somewhere in the middle, but it's simply because you've been told for so long the answer to the weight struggle is outside of you. So you haven't been paying attention to internal cues. So we have to relearn that, and it takes time. So being kind to yourself and just patience, but it can be relearned. We can reconnect that. It just takes some practice.
Shawn, I think it's so funny that you say that because I've been doing some of this work as part of my professional learning, right? And one of the tasks that I had to do in one of my training sessions was just to hold like food in my mouth. And I was shocked how I basically had trained my brain in my mouth during all my years of training and working hard, like working 90 hours a week, if that's what doctors have to do to train, right? That like I couldn't hold food in my mouth. I like all the muscles in my tongue had already been so trained just to like push everything back in and eat food really quickly that like I was like gagging and choking, and I just was like, this is sort of insane that I'm logically telling my body keep food in your mouth, and all my muscles and tongue had been just be like, no, we always just eat, right? Because you have to run to your next shift or your next library session or whatever. And how like powerful that was to me, that I was just like, I can't, like those years of training had happened, and how we don't even really acknowledge all the training behind our eating habits and sort of overriding some of these natural cues that our body should be feeling, right? Whether it's being too full or not, or being too hungry at all. And then it leaves us a bit lost in our guidance of like whether or not we should be eating.
Right. And we say like, what's wrong with me versus like, oh, this is just something you've learned. Like maybe it's a sibling ate really fast and you had to eat fast to get enough food. Like you learned that pattern, or it was working 90-hour weeks. Like that makes sense that you would learn that pattern. And nothing's wrong with you. Your body was just doing what it
had always done, right?
Yeah.
And I think another common thing that, for that I'm sure a lot of women can relate to, right? Like we have so many busy, amazing women moms, right? And just women that are like working so hard at their jobs and at, being a mom and being a good partner, that they just don't listen at all to their hunger cues. And some women will come in and tell us like, I don't eat all day, not because they're like trying to do it on purpose, but like, I just like am so busy that I like don't even know if I'm hungry or full, or like I have no idea. And so part of this journey is like giving your brain and your body some space to just feel where that goes, and relearning, what does it feel to be hungry? What does it feel to be full? And a lot of times I'll even recommend people pausing mid-meal, right? Just to feel what it feels like to be full, or maybe they're not full at all, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
they want
Yeah.
to eat some more, and just kind of retraining our body and our brains to connect a little.
Yeah, yeah, it's so important. And I think same thing, like I think so much of the work that I do now, at least on the podcast, we talk a lot about like diet culture and down with diet culture and like kind of hustle culture. And then, just our obsession with doing, right, in our culture. But then there's this aspect that's very real, that is women are still doing more than men. It's not equal still. And so being able to like name that, and again, not blame yourself, but some of the work that I do with people were like, if we were going deeper, we're going to say like, maybe we're going to actually reshift some of the beliefs about like what is enough for you to do, and give yourself permission to not do some of those other things, so that mindful
Yeah.
eating doesn't become like just another thing on the to-do list that you're like, God, I
Yes.
have time for
Yes. Yeah.
that.
I know we run into that a lot too. That, and I always say we have sort of some, we call them our seeds or our 7 essential elements of daily success. And sometimes women will kind of leave a bit overwhelmed that like, oh my gosh, like there's all these things to do. But we like to say, it's not a finger wag, it's more of a gentle whisper of like, here's just some reminding tips that like you as a woman like could do. You could not, you could do one, you could do all 7, but like at least you have something to like kind of just put your mind to, so it can be helpful as a guidance. And we
Yeah.
definitely don't want to add anything else to women's plates, right, with adding
Right.
mindful eating on top of this. That's definitely not our intention.
Yeah. And sometimes like, yeah, when you're making space for it and you're like, oh, this is helpful to me to eat regularly throughout the day, for example, then it's like, all right, maybe we need to clear out some other things. And that's obviously like a whole nother conversation, but can be really a much more sustainable pattern
Yeah.
for like, I'm not gonna do it all. My house is gonna be a mess. That's at least what I usually choose. It's just gonna be
Yeah.
a mess, and it's fine. At least for now.
Yeah. Anything else, Shawn, that you like sort of think is just really important for all those women out there that are trying to lose weight?
I think to really take an honest look at the things that you've tried and how much you are internalizing your own sense of blame about it not working in the past for you. And I shouldn't put it in quotes because you're like, I didn't get the result I wanted, right? But I think really taking a look at that and saying, okay, how can I rebuild self-trust, and how can I learn to listen to myself again? It's hard work. I don't want to sugarcoat and say like, just think of it this way and it's easy. It's really emotionally challenging work, and very much worth it. So I would say don't give up. If you're feeling like
Yeah.
there's a better, different way, um, keep at it, and keep looking at. There's more resources now in it to shift how we think about these things, which is nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And
And so
resources.
yeah, so these are some of Shawn's resources. If you would love to speak with her, or she has a couple of classes and programs, including her podcast, that are available for patients. I don't know, Shawn, if you want to talk a little bit about, either your classes or some of your services.
Yeah, for sure. So I have a lot of free resources. 2 of them are up there. One is to help you kind of understand how to develop that internal sense of motivation, that sustainable motivation. So that's on the left there. And then I have some fun snack ideas to practice this idea of eating more throughout the day. So we can always have ideas. So those are just free resources. The podcast and my blog are completely free. That's Motivation Made Easy, Body Respect, True Health. All of this is on my website, and I do have right now it's a self-paced program called the Body Respect Program, but I do do some one-on-one work. So if you're looking for support in this area, definitely feel free to reach out, email me. It's all on my website, and I'd love to connect.
Awesome. So, Shawn, the one thing that we do at the end of our visits, we just do some take-home tips just to kind of summarize some of the stuff that we talked about. So feel free to jump in whenever whenever you like. So take-home tip number 1, what is your relationship with food, right? So even asking yourself as a patient, right, what is my relationship with food? It may be amazing. You may feel like you have a great handle on it, or it may be on the other end of the spectrum where you're like, no, I'm leaning on food, maybe a little too much for coping, or I've been overly restrictive and I kind of need some help. So it's always a great question to sort of reflect on.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is like, how do I think about my body? Am I appreciating it? Am I taking care of it? Am I loving our bodies can be a stretch sometimes, but like, am I at least listening to what it's telling me, I would say is
Awesome.
typically very related.
Yeah, and sometimes if we 100% rely on our bodies to tell us the exact truth about what's going on, it can be a little confusing, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
wish our bodies just kind of gave us a little memo, but that's not always the case, right?
Yeah, it's
Sometimes
not
we can
always
feel
clear cut.
too tired, get constipated, right? Have a lot of pain or aches. Sometimes those can be cues that our body's sort of not in a great place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Tip number 2. So, what are your barriers to healthy thoughts about food? So, a lot of the times we were talking about, there's all these external cues that are coming towards us, whether it be, through social media, through our friends and family, maybe even through your own doctor, right? And so, where have you sort of learned some of these things, and what sort of in your day to day can you reflect on that maybe you need to take a break from for a little bit, right? Whether that's maybe Instagram or TikTok or some of those other places where people are sort of bombarding you with other thoughts.
Yeah, I love that. If we can cut out some of the external noise, that can really help with the tuning in process.
Yeah. All right. Tip number 3. Know your phase of ovarian function. So we are obviously big believers that menopause really affects a woman's body in good ways and some not so fun ways, right? It can sort of feel like as a woman that your body has betrayed you. As women go through the transition of menopause, sometimes they can feel that their cravings are a bit all over the place. And so knowing where you're at in that phase of ovarian function can really be settling, because if you feel like your cravings have really gone up and you're learning to listen to your body, and maybe your weight has gone up and your relationship with food has changed, it may be helpful then to sort of get some other information from a menopause provider or your primary care doctor as to what to do next, in addition to spending some time thinking about your relationship with food. So as always at True Women's Health, we care a lot about where women are at in terms of their phase of ovarian function. And we really think it's important for every woman to empower themselves to know their own phase of ovarian function and sort of where they're at in their life journey. Shawn, do you see sort of changes as women go through menopause, or do you feel like you have any insight into sort of that correlation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not my area of expertise, but I definitely see that being more of a struggle, certainly after menopause, and in terms of like this trying to like force my body to get to this lower weight that it used to be at, and that how that
Yeah.
can create this restrictive pattern that we're talking about, and like being able to try to work with your body versus against it. And I think that's,
Yes. Yeah.
I think it can be very frustrating. So I want to normalize that frustration, and it can be sort of associated with like a loss of hope. But I think when we learn to really work with our bodies, it can be very much, very much a hopeful thing.
Yeah. And I think something that's important to know, I mean, menopause is going to happen to all of us, right? If we make it to that age of life, all of us women. Um, and kind of embracing it and sort of creating some space to sort of listen to our body and appreciate where it's at and where it's going, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Tip number 4. So consider therapy with a specialist. If you're really like, this really hit home, I'm not sure where to go, I would love to learn more about this. I mean, not only are there mental health specialists such as Shawn that are available either, like I said, podcasts, classes, and personal consultations, but there's also some, medical weight loss doctors that are available too that sort of know this area. And it's really a growing field within the field of obesity medicine to sort of talk about mindful eating, intuitive eating, and these kind of talking about these different struggles. So, as always, if you're in the state of Michigan, we're sort of happy to see you. But you definitely can look up specialists sort of in your area, other mental health specialists that could be worth talking to and getting some other tools and a space to sort of talk some of this out if you're really struggling either with being overly restrictive or sort of binges that are causing you a lot of distress. All right.
Yeah.
Shawn, any other thoughts about finding a specialist?
I was thinking about that as you were talking. I mean, I think sometimes it does kind of depend a little bit, right? If we're talking about a significant eating disorder, I would more go to something like the National Eating Disorder Association for a list of specialists who are certified eating disorder specialists. But But like you were saying, obesity medicine specialists, or even I think lifestyle medicine specialists can be really great too. So it kind of can depend a little bit, but I'm happy to
Yeah.
point people in the right direction if they're like, where do I go?
Yeah. All right, great. And tip number 5. All right, know your role of weight loss medications in your journey. So, obviously, sometimes these cravings and overwhelming feelings of hunger can be a little too much. And there are biochemical changes that are happening throughout our body, at our liver, and our GI tract. And sometimes it's worth using a weight loss medication as part of your journey to get, to sort of be on track and where you need to be. And that's always worth sort of reviewing either with obesity medicine specialist or another doctor who's familiar with the use of these medications. So it's one of the things that we do here at True Women's Health. And we do believe in sort of that as being a piece of the puzzle of someone's weight loss journey, in addition to working on our mindset and learning to listen to our bodies and our brains and sort of trusting ourselves. All right. So if you want to check out Shawn, you know how to get her information, and you can, if you want to come see me at truewomenshealth.com, we're here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and you can check out all of our information at truewomenshealth.com, or you can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Well, Shawn, thanks so much for coming on our little show here.
Thank you for having me. It was very fun.
Yeah. So hopefully we will chat soon if anything new comes up in this field.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
All
Thank you
right.
again.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.